Now we're live.
All right.
Let's wait a give a 1 minute for early arrivers and stuff.
So Rob, I just retweeted what I
Yeah,
think.
that works.
Perfect. By the way, my little live stream here, is that like is it a duck in the upper corner? What
Oh
is
yeah,
that?
it's for so you can see all that. You'll be able to see the questions and stuff. Then
No, but I mean, is it a duck?
it is a duck, I believe.
I wonder what that.
I think it symbolizes you. You're a duck.
You?
If you throw like a duck and you, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's just for StreamYard. It's their logo. I don't know why it's a duck. And I'm pretty sure you're right. I mean, I think it's a duck. There we go. Somebody's saying hi to us.
All right.
Salmon burrito. Nice. We've got
Hey,
some
we
people
have, each,
back
we
later.
have each other no matter what, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Alan, I don't know if you know this, but Alan, you can see the guitar. He's kind of a rock star. So
He is a rock star, an acoustic rock star, apparently,
yeah.
but a rock star
we,
nonetheless.
we were
It's funny.
talking to Nunzio last week, and Nunzio used to be a studio musician, and like he's a really elite guitar player. And,
He strikes me as that. I don't know why. I thought.
and so he played a riff for me when he got home. I was giving him a hard time I was shouting out Stevie Ray Vaughan songs, and he went home and played one for me. It was really cool.
Nice.
I play a little. Alan plays a little. He's really good. So it's like we're like 9U travel ball team, and he's really a big leaguer. At least in the minors.
I am god awful at musical instruments. We're not going down there.
The funny thing is Randy plays us off like he's not that. Randy was in a band for how many years, Randy?
I had a
4 years. Yeah, sure. Yeah. I just got to sing along though. They did all the hard stuff. I just got to sing along with this one.
yeah. I don't know if you'd be worse off me singing or me playing. One of the two, or me dancing. There's like nothing. I maybe write lyrics is about all I can do.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
you're the
something,
poet.
right?
That's it. Yeah, words and music, baby. Words and music.
Exactly. Well, let's get started. Alan, do you want to kick us off with the impetus behind this return to throw manual and kind of what you're trying to do with it?
First of all, I love the word impetus. First
I
of all,
just
man,
made that word up.
Hey, catalyst, impetus, I love it. Number one, I know I echo this on behalf of Randy, man. We so appreciate you doing this. I think to your question, you and I have talked many, many times about this. Obviously, Randy knows plenty of this background, but this is sort of a part two of the 120 program for the healthy population, to be honest. And as you know, many of us in the baseball community have been pushing hard for individuality and long toss and freedom and all the good things that happen beyond 120 feet, which was the old, kind of rehab mentality. And to be honest with you, it was just, I don't know if it's been 15, 20 years, but I've been sort of getting the same feel and feedback as has Randy and countless others from players going through rehab, in that when they get to that magic 120-foot marker, that is when not that they haven't been on the mound yet, they have, but that's when the technical ramp up starts, where there's, ramping up pens with full intent at some point, live BPs, game situation. And for us, we just come from a world where we believe so much in distance throwing and in freedom, and also in letting the athlete acclimate to who they are. So in other words, pre-surgery, were they a 250 guy? Were they a 330 guy or gal? Were they, and if they were a 120 arm, then that's great. You can go to 120, and then you can start to transition into your mound work. And so for us, there's this huge piece missing in the current standardized, many of the most popular and well-known programs essentially cap the player at about 120 feet. Some go a little further. And then again, they start that transition. And for us, there is so much magic that happens beyond 120 feet that Randy, I'm sure, will want to talk about as well. So last thing I'll say is this. I think the main, even though there's many, many things we get into like self-regulation and other things that we feel like are really critical with the rehab process, I think the main piece is this there's this missing link for us after 120 feet that we're going to just put out a simple number and say it's at least probably another 4 weeks, where we just want the athlete, to use a term from Will Carroll, we just want the rehabbing athlete to become the athlete, to start to have freedom beyond 120 feet, let the arm start to condition and get into shape according to your own kind of innate movements, your own innate feel. And look, that might take 4 weeks, it might take 6 weeks, but the bottom line is this: we want the athlete to have a chance to get into optimal, not only long toss shape, but with long toss comes endurance, conditioning, variability, feel, better recovery. And these are all the things we want to happen before they start the ramp up period on the mound.
Would you say that's a key to preventing injury to begin with too, is to give people the freedom to do what they need to do and listen to their body?
It's, for us, our number one principle we've been saying for 30 plus years is listen to your arm. You know, I think at the end of the day, everybody, of course, is different. Everybody has their own feel, their own rhythm, and their own way of getting their arm in shape. And I would argue that when you roll out of bed and don't know any differently, you're going to want to throw with some arc and distance and stretch your, because it just feels intuitive to the body. So yes, to your question, is we just feel like this is so, that's another thing about our program. Our program is built out to where you can hop off at 120 or you can hop off at 300. It doesn't matter. You are following your plan and listening to your arm, because only your body knows at the end of the day, and your intuition knows at the end of the day what it wants and needs.
Yeah, I think that we get this question a lot, Rob. Is that like, why is this necessary? Don't we already have a return to throwing program? Everyone does, and we do, and it's universal. And Al and I have been talking about this thing. Probably, you know, I'm a night guy. I'm kind of, you know, the guy who stays up all night, and so I got a lot of West Coast friends, and so Al and I talk a lot in the late evenings for 5 to 7 years, right, Alan, about like, wow, how is this thing still going on? And the thing that is out there, it works to a degree. I mean, but if we're real, it was written, the return to throwing program that everybody does, we've all seen it, you know, 25 throws and 45 feet. Let's be real. It has worked pretty well, but it was written when it was still okay to smoke cigarettes in the dugout. And so it needed to be updated in some way, right? But then when we began to look at it, it was one of the problems that we saw. It wasn't bad. The criteria to support the traditional plan has always been, look, the research, the literature tells us we have a 93% return to previous level of play success rate. And when you think about that in the literature, it does. There was one study that talked about some MLB metrics of guys that returned. Did they actually pitch better, or were they the same or worse? But they rated it as throwing one pitch at the prior level. So if you were a college guy and you threw one pitch in a college game, success. If you were a single A guy, one pitch, success. To me, Rob, that's a low bar, right? These guys were all on a trajectory of improvement before they got hurt. And we're saying that we're going to take them out for 18 months, bring them back and put them right back in where they left. And I think we need to make the bar higher. Let's try and see if we can bring them back further along that pathway than they were. And I think that one thing, look, people need to appreciate how much Alan Jaeger has worked. He's put his heart and soul into this thing. How many hours it took him to kind of, he didn't just start, he talked to a whole community of people, a consortium of people. And so this is a community effort of him just getting as much information before we even started writing the program. And so it's been a labor of love, and we've talked many nights, but I think the one thing he did was provide clarity. That old program, while it was good, it just didn't tell you enough information what to do, right? And then clarity, and also we learned this from Dr. Marcus Elliott, Harvard MD, who now runs in the performance world and mostly in basketball, has this place called P3 Sports Performance out in Santa Barbara, I believe it is. Really well-known guy. He told me once that the number one predictor of injury is the delta. That is the change. Remember in chemistry class, the delta and the change. And so our process became, we need to manage the deltas. We need to make sure that the transitions between the phases are smoother. And in the traditional program, those transitions, the only criteria for advancement is time. If you get to this week, you should be here. And Alan we've kind of tried to iron that out and say, look, put the calendar away and let's listen to your body and let's individualize within a framework, of course. But then let's smooth out the transitions. He was talking about that transition to the mound. In the program that he and I wrote, there's this phase where we're kind of blending in those mound pitches a little at a time gradually, and we're kind of stretching things out a little bit at a time gradually and kind of making the transitions more smooth. And I think that's really the ability. And also he's included a whole community of people, like the strength and conditioning program, the plyo warm-ups, some anchor throws that Eugene Bleecker gave us, Nolan Repe gave us some good stuff, and Nunzio Signor gave us some stuff on strength. So it's more holistic and it's a little bit more individualized. And I think the key is smoothing out those edges and the transitions. And he's done an incredible job of that.
Yeah, you think about where the game was when this originally came up. There was no real extreme long toss type thing. There was no really strength and conditioning was at its infancy, maybe even discouraged among pitchers at that point. We had no high speed cameras. We had no anything, but yet this was the golden thing. And I think it's because people are very hesitant to challenge doctors in general, even though doctors, their expertise isn't in throwing, it's in doing the surgery to begin with. I do see somebody pointing out that Trevor Bauer has, done extreme long toss for a while and preached it, but I don't know if this person, if Kevin knows. Alan, didn't you work with Trevor back in the day? You introduced the extreme long toss to him.
Well, Trevor, which I didn't even know, through Jim Wagner, who was his pitching coach out here in LA, brought him to our camp, I think when he was 11. And throughout the years, I was around Trevor and got a chance to, hopefully impart some ideas onto him. But yeah, he fell in love with long toss, and it just became, I don't know, when you really think about it, at the end of the day, throwing is king. And the fact that he, became known for long toss, I think is just a sign of how important it was to him, obviously. But to me, long toss is something that is just, if you said what's one thing that you should really study, like right now, as you know, we have so many different modalities out there in the world. And if you said, what's the one thing that you really want to get great at, it's throwing. And I believe, and I've been doing this for 34 years, and I've talked to a lot of brilliant people like Randy and yourself. And the consensus is, without any question, that the people that seem to have the best, strongest, most resilient, most durable arms with feel seem to be the ones that like to throw a lot and like to throw far. And how often you do that is up for debate. But I just think that since you angled into long toss, you know me, I'm going to go down that road pretty quick.
Well, and some of the things that Randy was just bringing up, I think, make a lot of sense too. Is the delta is important because you think about it in every other aspect of your life. If you're doing strength and conditioning, you don't go in there and lift your max right away. You build up to it, right? It's like everything. And why don't we think of throwing like that instead of saying this is the way we're going to be? Now we're going to stop at this distance. We're going to stop at this time, and now you're good. Hey, here we go. Instead of building somebody up. I think that's where we fall down a little bit is we're trying to protect pitcher. I understand it, like protecting workloads and all that stuff. I get it. I get why people's instincts are that, but to some extent you could protect somebody out of their own safety by if you baby it too much, or if you don't let them get to the point where they've built up this resistance or whatever it is, built up the endurance, a whole bunch of things, you're kind of sacrificing potential health.
Yeah, I can chime in on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 2011, Alan was already introducing long toss to the world, and then the study came out, right? And everybody thought it was going to be the end of long toss. And the study showed that when they did motion capture analysis, that when the distances got further out, the athlete changed their mechanics and they added more stress to their ligament, okay? Perceived stress based on what the sensors from the motion capture were telling us, okay? We can take that whole argument, whether that's actually stress because the muscles, the problem with biomechanics, Rob, and now the problem with biomechanics is doggone it, we're alive. The fact that we're alive makes biomechanics really tough. And so, because we can't really account for all the nuanced muscle contractions that occur to attenuate stresses. And we'll never measure that. It's internal, right? But this study came out and it said that the problem with long toss is that it takes the pitcher out of his mechanics, changes the mechanics, and it adds stress to the elbow. And I wrote an article back then, and it might have been the first time Alan and I ever met when I wrote this article. It was like, that's the whole point. That's the good part. It actually takes you out of, because we know we can't repeat it exactly. So it lets you explore movement, and it adds stress incrementally, gradually managing the delta, so that now you build a more robust, resilient, soft tissue connection there, so that it's not shocked. The biggest thing is when you shock the system, when you shock the arm, it's in trouble. So
yeah, you make a really good point about taking you out of your mechanics too. I had talked to Yu Darvish about this, and he's a firm believer in doing warm-up throws, doing long toss, everything else outside of his normal mechanics, so he can feel different things. And that helps him get better in his view, versus repeating his mechanics over and over again, even when he's not on the bump, actually makes him worse, which I thought was the first time I heard somebody actually say it. And I know he's done this, like, you does every study. Yeah, he looks into everything he possibly can. And he's a firm believer that taking you out of your mechanics is very important to help you get better at your mechanics.
You know, it's funny, as I have a tweet that I've put out quite a bit, which is the irony to long toss is that we actually want you to come out of your mechanics to tap into your most innate movement patterns, your variability, your proprioception. And then we want to get that athlete out, and then take that athlete and put that athlete back into the quote unquote mechanical. Let that be your quote unquote mechanics. And I feel like this is one of the greatest misnomers of all time about release point and changing your release point. You said it perfectly. And I know I learned this from Randy a long time ago about the word I knew it from Phil. He taught me the word variability. And it's just a reality of life. The more that we can feel different things and be in different spaces and develop that proprioception, the more accurate we're going to be. And you know, Butch Thompson has the greatest line of all time. I've heard about this, which, you know, he said at the ABCA show about 5 years ago, which is, I can't repeat my own signature twice in a row. You know,
Yeah.
So that's just, to me, a powerful symbolism of you know, I've always said to people, if you really want to have perfect mechanics and repeat, which is the big reason why they want you to throw on a line at 120 or 60 feet. Well, if you really want to quote unquote repeat, you should theoretically throw off the mount at 60 feet, 6 inches the rest of your life. And Randy, you can maybe speak to this, but what's the syndrome called when you do too much repetition of the same muscle memory?
The definition of overuse is doing the same thing over and over again, right? So the idea that overuse is the culprit in injury has been challenged in the motor learning world. And there's a new theory called the variability overuse hypothesis, which says, you know what, we don't want to do it exactly the same way every time, because that imparts the exact same stresses on the exact same tissue over and over again. Just take a ride from Atlanta to Jacksonville and try to keep your foot on the exact same place in the gas pedal the whole time. It's miserable, right? So we want it to change. And so when we understand that if you can't repeat your mechanics, and it's impossible, the old Bernstein hammer experiment showed that, it's going to be a little different every time. You can narrow the bandwidth, but that tells us that the body isn't interested in a single movement solution to the throwing problem. It wants a family of reasonable solutions. And so by exploring long toss and letting your body self-organize, you're finding the bandwidth, you're exploring the edges of what you can move in. And I see pitchers warm up before a game in their pitching mechanics. They never throw when they're not in their mechanics. And I think that by just letting them explore more, they allow themselves to self-organize and find this family of solutions that they can use that's within a reasonable bandwidth. We get to the consistent endpoint, like we want the same result. We just don't get there the same way every time.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions, and I think the term mechanics in general actually does a disservice to what we're doing. It sounds mechanical.
Yeah,
we're talking about movement patterns and stuff that you're
exactly.
Yeah. Somebody said, or missed the intro, are we talking about shoulder injuries? He has their son's a college pitcher diagnosed with bicep tendonitis and is experiencing discomfort after treatment. So, I mean, this is all for everything. We're talking about return to throw from kind of everything. How would you treat something like that? Somebody's returning to throw, has experienced a setback, I guess. What would you?
Well, our first reaction would be the setback would be because that they stayed in that more, what we consider to be a much more conservative and restrictive program again, maybe going out to 120, and also just the path along the way. You know, we've only talked about the big part of what happens beyond 120 feet, but Randy and I also have, you know, and again, we know that the medical community is doing the best they can. This is nothing against them, but we just feel like from a baseball point of view now, this is what needs to be more integrated. And so maybe as an example, for instance, on a lot of the return to throwing programs, they might be throwing 3 days a week for 10 weeks, where we add a 4th day in week 7, we add a 5th day, I think, in week 12. So maybe there's not enough throwing as one just simple explanation. The other thing is that we talk about self-regulation, we talk about massage throwing, we actually have videos that show you how to do massage throwing. So the other, again, there could be 10 reasons why, but one of the other reasons could be that when they first come from the rehab clinic for 5 months, their first few throws, they might be very tense, they might be rigid, there might not be a lot of feel. We go to great lengths to talk up front about that first transition into throwing, which is why we actually did a video on what we call massage and arc throwing. So, Rob, there could be many, many reasons, and that's another reason we just love our program. Our program, as Randy says, we just go into so many different angles, and we present so much different information and insight into how to make this transition. And so, and one other quick thing is our program, because Randy and I, we talked about this and we felt like it's too much to tackle 30 different possibilities. So we do state up front that this is for a traditional TJ, but it is critical that people understand that no matter what, even if you're just off for 3 weeks or 4 weeks and you want to reboot, you can essentially pick up our program at week 10 or so. I mean, the first 10 weeks to some degree, but our program, in other words, is built to where you can hop on at some point and still follow the protocols. And we feel like that you're well covered that way.
Yeah. One quick thing is, where can they get the program? Where can Mike help his son and get the throw-in program?
It's on both of our websites. If you go to jaegersports.com or floridaarmory.com.
FloridaBaseballArmory.com.
Yeah, it's free and easy to find, and we've posted it a ton of times. If they go to our websites, it's on the homepage.
Perfect.
Rob, I've had several guys that have come to me since we published this thing that they didn't get surgery, but they're just returning from an off period because they had tendonitis, right? And so I've been a physical therapist now for 30 years, and I've gotten to the point where they call everything tendonitis. And so it's almost like saying you have tendonitis to me is like saying you have a left ear. Like, okay, why? And it speaks to the idea about variability in throwing and exploration. Why would you want to throw exactly the same way you threw when you got hurt? Why would you want to do that the same way? So we get into the return to throwing program. We have to begin to explore new ways. We can sometimes manipulate that. We can sometimes guide them toward, hey, this thing you're doing is probably contributing to your biceps being under duress and getting inflamed. But we need to give them the freedom to explore. And so when we get a guy who's not coming off surgery, I've been giving him the program and going, look, it says here to do this for like these 3 days, but let's say you do it 2 days and it feels great. Then skip up to the next level. Just compress it and kind of listen to your body. But it's a 40-page document, right, Alan? Is it 40 pages? The concepts that are described in there apply to every injury situation, every scenario. It applies to healthy people. The overarching concepts are there. The schedule is written for a TJ, but it could be compressed and adapted for any situation.
Gotcha. Somebody's asking about ligaments. Do they regrow? Can they become stronger after long toss? Can actual connective tissue become stronger from the stress that you're putting on your arm?
Randy.
Yeah, you want me to get that? Absolutely. I've been in surgery with Dr. Coco Eaton many times, watching him do Tommy John surgeries. And he'll frequently lift up the torn ligament and go, look how thick this thing has gotten. It has been trying to resist the stress, whatever was causing it, and it adapted by becoming tougher. You can absolutely make connective tissue tougher, okay? You can do it in 2 ways. You can make the actual ligament more robust, more resilient, but you can also finely tune the coordination of the muscles around it that protect it. And not only are you getting a physiologic adaptation, but also a neurologic adaptation that both serve to protect it.
That makes sense too, because I mean, I think a lot of people look at it and there was this old saying that you only have so many bullets in your arm, but you only have so many steps in your legs. Do you only have it's a living organism that unless you put some stress on it, yeah, you may only have a few because, right, like anything else, it's gonna break. I mean, if I just went in downstairs and tried to deadlift 500 pounds, I'd break everything in my body. If I worked my way up to it, might be different. So you have to give the right time to heal, the right time to get stronger, the right stress to put on it, and all that. It's like everything else. So the bullets in the arm theory it's done a disservice, I think, to a lot of folks and scared them away from throwing, which then maybe creates more issues in some respects.
Yeah, we have to me, you're getting started on a whole different topic, which is this idea of chasing velocity, running guns, pulling down, personal records, all this stuff. And I want to just tell everybody, look, you can do that stuff. We love that stuff too. I want to see how hard I can throw a ball too. But man, there has to be 5, 6, 7 days a week worth of conditioning and throwing and build up and, stuff that what you just said. And I think if there's one thing, and I don't have the data for this in the data world we're in, but if there's one thing you said, what is the absolute key to why we're having so many arm injuries? There's a lot of reasons, obviously, but to me, the main reason is not enough throwing. And it doesn't mean throwing at 300 feet every day. It doesn't mean pulling down every day. Get out and, one of my favorite lines of all time from Randy is the body's made to move. And we just need to get out there. And I mean, to give you an analogy about why throwing is so important, just any type of throwing, is why do BP pitchers make 300 to 400 throws a day, 6 to 7 days a week, and don't break down after 40 years? I mean, people can say, well, they're not throwing sliders and that's fine. But let's still talk about this. Catchers. One of the major league organizations did a study about 4 years ago on their catchers in spring training alone. And I don't remember the exact number, but I believe it was close to 500. It was between 400 and 500 throws a day the catchers were making. And we all know that TJ is such a rare occurrence with catchers. So just start from that premise that the arm, to use Randy's term, is resilient. It's robust. It wants to be fed. It wants to work. And I just feel like it doesn't want to work throwing as hard as you can 4 days a week to keep setting personal records. And again, that's sort of another piece that goes back to our throwing program. As Randy said, our return to throwing program can be used for anybody, healthy arm, non-healthy. The bottom line is that we just need to throw smartly, and we need to throw in a way that more consistently, and we need to have an idea of how does that integrate with higher intent throws.
How do you introduce this concept to your doctor, your surgeon, who gives you this piece of paper, it's a few pages long, and says, this is what I want you to do? Do you actually just go off and do your own program and say, thank you, sir, but I don't mention it? Or do you say, hey, I'm looking at this other alternative way of doing it that takes into account a lot of this, but also introduces freedom? How do you do that? As a player, how do you deal with that? Would your coach and the surgeon potentially, and whoever the therapist is that's working with them, are telling you to do this?
Well, I can speak to that. I think that there's a misconception that this program that we've written is radically different from the old one. Like, we just tore it up, and we didn't want to do that, right? We didn't want to go and take on that fight, right? Like, let's just disrupt everything. What we did is we took the existing program, and so in the first 10 weeks or so, Alan, it's essentially the same with a more holistic approach, including the strengthening program, the warm up, some more movement pattern based throws and things like that than just mindless throws, some things to try to reorganize your movement patterns. It's pretty close to the old, so it's not something radically different. Ben Brewster wrote a great addendum to it where we're using the radar gun to actually find your true intensity to measure and gradually add that number, so you're not just guessing about how hard you're trying to throw.
I love that part. Yeah.
And so it's not much different. And so, look, every physician is different. I've worked with them my whole life, and some doctors, when they learn to trust me as the physical therapist, they have said, go do what Randy tells you to do. He's got you from here. The surgeon doesn't want to deal with it. The reason the surgeon had to inject himself into this, is that people were kind of screwing it up and it was coming back and they failed. And they were like, well, I can't control this part. I have to at least give them something to do. Okay.
Right.
So I don't think that it's all that radically different. So I don't think you have to go, hey, doctor, this is what we're, and I don't think the doctor ever intended on you rigidly following. They were just giving you guidelines because, and they actually sent you to the physical therapist first, and then the physical therapist gave the plan. And so I think it's not that much different. And so I think if you show it to them, it'll make sense,
Yeah. Well, the other thing, and it just hit me, like you wouldn't go to a strength and conditioning coach or anybody that says you're going to lift 120 pounds this week. Next week, you're going to do 150. Then you're going to do 200. Now you're going to work your way up to 500. Number one, that 500 may not be reasonable for you. You may be higher or lower, and all those numbers in the interim may be higher or lower. Why is it that throwing is something special, that these are not the number of feet that we have to go to, not even telling you the velo you're throwing in those feet. So you're not measuring it in those programs. So we're adding, someone said, what are the main differences? We're adding some feel to this. We're letting you listen to your body. We're giving you other techniques that supplement the traditional program, as well as giving you some measurables that you can do to say, hey, this is really 60% effort, not what you think is 60% effort.
Yeah, and if I could add one piece too, which is I've done a ton of research on this. I wrote an article, I think, as you know, Rob, in 2012 on the origin of the 120-foot program, where I interviewed Stan Conte, who was the head guy with the Dodgers. I interviewed Dr. Yoakum in person, who was amazing. Kevin Wilk from ASMI, just a bunch of people. And I really wanted to know what is the origin of the 120-foot program. And many things I learned, specifically from Dr. Yoakum, who was a direct lineage to Dr. Jobe, right, in Curlin, the Curlin Jobe Center. And he told me a number of fascinating things, and one of them was how the whole thing started in '74, which is that the doctors and the PTs and the baseball people got in a room, and they just started to put their minds together. They probably took something similar to what they went through with, post-knee surgery, same concepts. But the original plan, the idea of the 120 feet, first of all, one of the greatest lines of all time from Will Carroll's interview with Dr. Jobe is that in his mind, 120 feet came from the fact that at Vero Beach, where the physical training center was, the next closest building was about 120 feet away. So when they ran out of room, they sent them over to the baseball side to keep doing their thing. And I
Very
think
scientific.
Yeah, well, there's many theories out there.
Yeah.
I got from Dr. Chris another great one, that 120 feet is about the size of an indoor gym, which makes sense. It's twice as far as the mound. So there's a lot of reasons where the 120 may have come from, but the point is this, as you both have said, it seems to be pretty arbitrary, especially in 1974. And the bottom line is this: we have all the respect in the world for the surgeons and the PTs and the athletic trainers, and we definitely think they should be involved. But I think that this is sort of, to me, where the rubber hits the road. There just comes a point, whether it's at 90 feet or 105 or 120, or there just comes a point where this becomes now a baseball territorial thing, meaning the baseball people need to take over. And so, as Randy said, I talked to Brittany Dowling, who's written one of the most recent return to throwing programs, I think through Rush and maybe partially through ASMI. And as Randy said, our first 10 weeks are very, very similar. And I asked Brittany if we could basically utilize a lot of this with her permission, and she said yes. And so you have to keep this in mind. We're staying pretty true to a lot of the similarities. That the 10 weeks is a lot. It's 2.5 months. Like, we're babying this thing consistently with the medical community. As Randy said, we've added some pieces like self-regulation and awareness, and we have some pre and post stuff from Nolan Rapay, and we have some stuff from Nunzio, and we have Ben's stuff in there as well. But we've also added this piece of self-regulation and awareness and arc throwing. And so I think that was a long way of just saying that, yes, we're not that much different in the first 10 weeks. What we're really saying is that there becomes a point at 120 feet. We need to get into the athlete. We need to get into the baseball phase now.
What I appreciate is the consortium of people that you've gotten together you're talking about the foremost experts in all of their fields, baseball related, that have all dealt with this issue, which is far more input than the original standards had. The the few pieces of paper you get with those standards. This has a lot more thinking behind it, which is why everybody should download it right now. I mean, it's free. Like, why would you not get it? It's free if you, I mean, and represents the thinking of some of the smartest people in baseball. If I'm dealing with an injury, that's the first thing I'm going to do is download it, and then obviously ask questions here. Somebody asked if you think pitchers should train symmetrically too, which you can get to. I'm sorry for cutting you off, Randy.
We'll talk about that in just a second. Let me just say this, and the guy over there in the right side of my screen, I love this guy. There was only one guy in the baseball world that had enough respect among everybody because of his long history and the way he's treated people his whole life that could have pulled this off. And that's Alan Jaeger. He's the only guy that could have gotten this many people who usually argue with each other and yell at each other and have debates. He's the only guy that could have glued this all together. And that's why I'm so honored to be a part of it, because everyone has respected this guy for so long, and the way he's carried himself and his interaction with other coaches, it's been great.
I think that's the one thing that everybody in baseball can agree with. Like, there is no doubt that that is true, and that he's, absolutely the most knowledgeable dude who's spent his whole life doing all this stuff, shares this stuff for free because he cares. And everybody knows it's just genuine. You can tell the second you talk to him, the enthusiasm, the knowledge that comes out of the man. I'm sorry, we're talking about you in front of your face. We usually say this behind your back.
Right.
My birthday was March 19th, you guys. Thank you.
No, but it's literally true. It's not often that you can actually talk to the dude about it and let you know how much you've meant to everybody and how much everybody appreciates this, including the ability to ask these questions to just, two of the most knowledgeable dudes on the planet in this stuff. I see Flat Ground is joined here too. Thank you. I believe I wonder if that's Josh. If it's Josh, we're not going to answer any of his questions.
I think training symmetrically you asked about. Look, there is some evidence in the medical research that, like, when you have a guy who can't use his left leg, if you strengthen the right leg, you'll get a little bit of a crossover effect. And I've been playing with this idea of we just had a kid that came in that hurt his elbow, and he got bored, and so he started throwing left-handed, and he's actually pretty good at it. And I thought maybe we should have our guys, when they can't use their right arm, throw with their left arm. But training symmetrically, we don't need complete asymmetry. This is a one-sided activity. And so if we try to take a guy who has developed this asymmetry that actually works for him, or a girl, I should say, by the way, and we try to make them symmetrical, we might mess them up. So you can't chase symmetry. You can chase coordination. I think it needs to be coordinated. It needs to be, everything needs to cooperate with all the other body parts. But to chase symmetry, I think is probably a flawed approach.
Yeah. I mean, you have someone like, again, I'm going to bring up Yu Darvish, who also throws lefty, obviously, but he can. And I think he does it for the exact same reason why he changes the mechanics, is he likes to feel all different things and feels. It's the same reason why we tell young pitchers the best way to learn how to pitch is to be a shortstop or to throw athletically and to do long toss and feel your body, versus just getting on the mound and teaching. Everybody wants the quick fix, right? Like, everybody has ever gone to you guys, the first thing they do if they're not familiar with you is like, what can I do to my mechanics to gain 3 miles an hour, or to not get hurt, or to whatever? It's always this one thing. And we grow up in such a quick fix mentality climate that everybody's looking for that. And what we're talking about here is a couple of months worth of work where you're gradually implementing stuff, listening to your body, dialing it back sometimes, dialing it forward sometimes, depending on stuff, and coming up with ways to cope with it, versus, the other, like, one quick thing, and now I'm going to be all back to normal and be great.
Yeah. Well, patience is a virtue. And it's funny, symmetry, I had a vision. And before I move on anymore, you guys you thank you for the very kind remarks. I'm blushing over here. I play a lot of tennis, and one day I hit with a buddy left-handed, and I've been working on my left hand anyway. And I work on my left hand a lot playing basketball, but I had a new reconnection with this value of just doing it, whether it's skill acquisition or whatever. But I will tell you this, I hit for a long time. We might have hit for 20 or 30 minutes. Then I went back and went to my right arm, and I just can't explain it. But the magic of going there for 30 minutes with my opposite arm and then hitting with my right arm again, the awareness, the intuition, the feel, I don't know. It's so, I just want to say, I'm not even sure what this all means. I can only tell you that there was something very, very cool about doing it. And I do think it's something that we should all play with, is working on these other parts.
It's kind of like when you come up with great ideas, you're usually doing something where you're not actually thinking about that specific thing. You're doing something else that spurs something. It's maybe the same thing with physical stuff too, where you're doing something and you're like, wait a second, I can do that move and bring it to my throwing, or do, whatever. You learn from not doing the same thing over and over and over again. Which is back to this consistent throwing in the same way all the time that Randy talked about earlier. It doesn't work. And I think in theory, it's like throwing darts. People think it makes sort of sense for accuracy purposes, and you know what, even if it did help for accuracy purposes, I got news for you. The 50 other benefits that you're missing out on by not throwing with, adaptability and variability, not to mention health, strength, endurance. And we don't even know, I don't think, whether it really does help with accuracy too. There's so many other things that go into it. I mean, I know Ben did a study on, or he's looked into, when pitchers, you'll take your eyes off the target in the middle of a throw, and that actually helps some folks, where you're always taught to keep your eyes on the target. So many top pitchers do not do that. That to basically handcuff somebody to these truisms that we always thought were the way to do stuff is doing people a disservice, which is, again, what we're doing here, which is breaking through some of these perceived truisms and adding to it with the smartest guys in baseball that have all gone through it numerous times and taking their knowledge and putting it all on paper and in video. Which, again, make sure you check everything out associated with this manual. It is really well done. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, do you think we can train command? I see that question. I've asked people that, and I think some people say you can't. I talked to George Kirby about it, who's about as good a command guy as possible. And I mean, he does train for it. Like, he throws into a 9 pocket and will hit each individual thing, but I don't know that it's one size fits all either on training for command. I think some.
Well, Rob, remember when we first started, they said you couldn't train velocity.
Exactly.
It was impossible. It's genetic, and it's a movement, right? If it's a movement, it can be trained. Like, I have this written on the back of our gym, and I truly believe it. It's not something that is a gift from God. My quote is, they asked me for a quote in the gym, so I arrogantly quoted myself. I said, God doesn't make junk, and human tissue doesn't have free will. If you stretch a muscle, it's got to get longer. If you strengthen it, it's got to get stronger. If we teach your body to move, it can't say, no, I don't feel like learning that. If we get the stimulus right, it must adapt. It doesn't get to decide. If it's not working, we don't have the stimulus right. So can you train command? It's just quality of movement that we're talking about. It's like, it's tightening the bandwidth of that variability and giving you the ability to make those real-time microsecond adaptations that have to work to get the movement adjusted to get it back to the right place. So yeah, you can train command. Of course you can.
Quick question with respect to injuries is, how much of it do you think is actually mechanics related, and I dare you, movement pattern related, and how much of it is genetics, the way you're built, and how much it is stress, getting your body adapted to it? What other things am I missing? Well, I'll start.
An easy question. I got a lot. I'm gonna defer, but I got a lot of ideas on that.
I'll keep mine pretty simple, because to me, I'm always going to come back to conditioning. I feel like if you said and Randy and I both participated in a really cool article that's supposed to be out any day now in the Atlantic, but to me, it's just black and white. And I know there's lots of gray, which is funny. There's lots of other reasons why. I mean, it could be mechanics. To me, I'm going to always go back to home base. Home base is arm conditioning, arm training, arm development, getting on a throwing program. And I don't know if I love the word program, but getting in a throwing routine where you have a high level of awareness of what it looks like to build up from scratch over a 4 or 5 week period, what it's like to maintenance in season. When do your pens come? What do you do the day before your pen, the day of your pen, the day after your pen, the day before your game, the day, so in other words, this is a very holistic concept, of course, of how are you training? It's like a marathon runner. Does a marathon runner wake up one day and just have bad marathon runner mechanics? I mean, maybe, but at the end of the day, if they've trained for a year or 2 or 3 to run a marathon, they've had to do a ton of conditioning and a ton of smart conditioning. So I'll let Randy take it from here, but for me, I want to make this crystal clear. If you are having arm issues, to me, it's like where there's smoke, there's fire. The source is going to, look, I've done this for 34 years. Sure, was it throwing too many sliders on a pen? Could be, of course. To me, whenever I go back to the source of someone who's had an arm issue or an arm soreness, it's almost always the same thing. We source it back to their throwing program, conditioning, and so on.
Yeah. In 2016, I wrote a book, 40,000 words on this topic. Okay. It's called Start with the Pain. And I got the idea, with his permission, I co-opted a list that was created by Ron Wolforth. And it talked about the 6 types of contributors to subpar performance or pain, which we can apply to injury as well. Okay. Number 1, it's your movement pattern. It's how you're moving. That matters. Okay. Number 2, it's your physical structure. It's how you're made, right? Because if you're moving poorly, we can identify some movement pattern things that put stress on the arm. If you're doing that over and over again, increased likelihood of getting hurt. Number 2, your physical structure, how you're made. If you're getting to the end of what you have available on every single throw and stress in the tissue, it's going to be tough. Some of the physical structure we can change, and some of it's anatomic. Some of it's how you're made. So we have to make sure we match the way you're moving with how you're built, so that that's working together optimally. Number 3 is the ramp up, the conditioning, the delta. Like you don't start throwing 150 pitches right away. You ease into it. You ramp up. I think that's why we used to see a lot of injuries in pro baseball in March and April, and not even close. Those are the 2 months when people get hurt. If workload was a problem, they get hurt in September and October. This infernal 3-month shutdown that everybody insists we have to have, I think contributes to that, because the ramp up is too steep. Number 4 is your strength and conditioning programs, your weight training, your weighted balls, your long toss. All those things can either contribute to or take away from. Number 5 is sleep, nutrition, hydration, and psychological stress. And if all of those are good, number 6 is workload. If the first 5 are good, you can throw a lot more. So before you start throwing a lot more, you got to manage that delta, right? And you got to get these things good so that you can throw more, and then you can throw more, right? And then it's workload. I think so. Putting a draconian pitch limit on somebody, we have some guys that could probably throw 200, 250 pitches if they had all those things good. And we have some that shouldn't be throwing 10 pitches because they haven't gotten there. So I think it's really holistic. It's really multifaceted. In the interview we did with The Athletic, they asked this question: are pitchers throwing too hard? And I said, let me rephrase the question. What you're asking me is this rise in injury, do we think it's due to pitchers throwing so hard? And I think that it's way more complex than that, right? I think that in any high level sport, in Olympic skating or sprinting or javelin throwing, whatever, you're always pushing a world-class athlete to the edge of what their body can do. And sometimes you fall off the edge. And so you have to ride that razor's edge. You have to manage it as much as you can, but we don't know enough to keep them from falling off yet. I think that we have learned faster how to develop pitchers than we have learned how to protect them. And I think that universally as an industry, we don't know enough yet on how to protect them. We sure as heck know how to develop them. And we got to get better at that other part. I think this return to throwing program is a big piece, not just because it can be applied to people coming back from an injury, but because of the information, the overarching concepts apply to even healthy pitchers, and in making sure that we develop them and do our best to keep them safe.
I think that's a great answer. Actually, I was asked by the Athletic article writer as well, and I came up with that same thing. It's like there is no sport where you're a world-class competitor. You're at the elitist of the elite level, and you're not pushing yourself. You'd have to be an incredibly talented two standard deviations better than everybody else in order to back off and be better than everybody, even when you're backing off. You're always going to push yourself. And part of the reason why you're great is because you pushed yourself to that level. Nobody gets anywhere without pushing themselves. The key is creating an environment where you you're helping them recover. You're helping you. Everything else around it is important to support it. And I think that is where we're poor at it, which is again why this effort is so good, getting all these people to get in there and say, hey, we got this development stuff. We're on the right path. Now we need to protect folks and also help them come back if they're injured.
And protect them in a way where we're not so stuck on risk aversion, right? I mean, I think that's a huge issue. I mean, yes, we want to be smart, but I think just to throw out, not that there's not a time and a place for pitch counts and all that, but I think now with like workload management, all of a sudden, it just feels like we're squeezing more and more into this realm of risk aversion. And I feel like we're doing this great job, so to speak, of building them up, but we have to take a lot of those principles and trust them. And we have to let the horse out of the barn. I mean, I feel like that, I know it's a different era, but I just think about the CGs of the Warren Spahns and Bob Gibsons and Don Drysdales and Sandy Koufaxes and Nolan Ryan. I mean, you just look at what they did on 3 days rest, and they threw BP between starts. And I know it's a different era, but there's something to be said about how much throwing they did in the 60s and 70s. And it's not a coincidence, by the way, that you had so many just bull strong athletes in that period.
Well, I get asked all the time on entrepreneurial side. It's like, what's the best way to make sure you succeed? I can tell you the best way to make sure you never fail at anything is never try anything. But is that like you're never going to be successful in it, but you're never going to fail? And is that what you want to do as somebody starting a business or somebody pushing yourself? Generally, if you're an athlete, you want to find out how good you are and how good you can be. That's the reason why we all do this stuff. So, I mean, I wake up every morning trying to figure out how good I can be. I don't know at what, but whatever I do every day.
You don't have to try, man. You just are.
That's just how I. Yeah, that's how I.
So roll. Tomorrow, Rob starts learning to play the guitar.
Yeah, that's what we got to do. That's what we do.
And we're gonna do a 3-way song with a karaoke with you too.
Yeah, as long as I'm not singing, we have a fighter's chance on this thing. Are there any other questions from folks out there? Do we feel like we've got this covered? Are you guys good? Are you all gonna download the manual? Is what you're going to do. And then both of these guys are fantastic at answering questions. Like, you can tell the passion they do this stuff with. You can't have two better people to bounce stuff off of. So, I mean, anyway, I appreciate y'all's time on this. Is there any parting words you want to give, unless I see another question pop up?
I just want to say I'm honored. Thank you so much. To everybody tweets, hey, I made it to Pitching Ninja. I can tell my mom I'm proud. We made it. We made it. All right. I'm so excited. And congratulations to everything you're doing. And I just want to, again, echo that. I'm honored to be a part of this thing with this dude here. He has done an incredible job, and the amount of work he put in has been phenomenal. And I really think it's going to help a lot of people. And on our website, it's floridabaseballarmory.com/RTT, return to throwing. It's pretty simple. And then if you need to reach us, the phone number is really easy, 866-STRIKE-3.
Oh, nice.
So 866-787-4533. So give us a call.
How many other ones did you have to go through before you got
I
started?
don't know. This is when we were first starting out. My web designer said, here's a number. I'm like, I like
That's
it.
pretty good. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it, man.
There you go.
No, and I, first and foremost, Rob, Randy, and I both are truly, we mean this. We're honored to be on with you. I've known you for a long time now. We've had a lot of conversations on the side, and people should know that you are exactly who you are. Publicly, you're just a great dude. You talk about passion and caring and what you're doing for the baseball community. And the thing I love about you so much is that you care about developmental, you care about education, you obviously care about injury prevention. Jack had to go through some injury stuff, and so we're pumped to be on this, and we're excited. And I think and to Randy, Randy says so many nice things about me, but for every conversation we had, that I'm leaning on him and bouncing stuff off him and sending him more stuff. And Randy, what do you think about this? And what do you got on that? And he had to vet so much of anything that was kind of science and medically based, not to mention he has great feel. So look, we're excited about this, and our number one job, to be honest with you, is to position the kids, the athletes going forward, obviously the coaches, to where they have an option. They can do something now where they feel like that maybe we'd like to think from a baseball point of view, they relate to a lot more and makes a lot more sense to them. And at the end of the day, we just hope that with all the people that are behind this in the coalition, including you, thank you, we just feel like that this is something that ultimately can position the athlete to come back in their really most optimal state. So again, thank you for having us on. It means a great deal to us.
Well, I mean, thank y'all for coming. This is fantastic. And again, everybody can reach out to these guys. They're as good of folks as you could possibly have in this area. And we all have the same passion. We want to see, I want to see for a variety of different levels. I just want to see the next generation of athletes succeed. I want to see current guys, number one, not get injured, but number two, if they get injured, get back as quickly as possible. And it makes good content for me. I'm pitching ninja, right? Like we have to have there are nasty guys come back. Like you don't know how much I hate not having Jacob deGrom out there.
Yes.
Well, thanks for everybody for tuning in. And again, feel free to reach out with questions. And I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Take care.
You too, bud.